Hey guys, tonight we wade into the sea, quiet, endless, and just a little salty with divine disappointment. The tide rolls in slow silver ribbons, brushing at what used to be a city. You can hear the hiss of foam against marble, the whisper of old prayers tangled in seaweed. Somewhere below, the fish weave through toppled statues and forgotten doorways, their scales flashing like lost coins. This is Atlantis, or at least one of its possible cousins, depending on which poet you trust. The story tonight is simple. Poseidon, god of the sea, the earthquake, and apparently poor design reviews, once built a perfect city, and then promptly lost it. Some say he sank it on purpose. Others claim it just couldn't handle his mood swings. You'll decide as we drift along. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel generous, tell me your location and local time down in the comments. It's always fun seeing who's falling asleep where. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of a pale, moonlit shore. The air is heavy with brine, the kind that coats your lips and curls your hair. Out in the distance, the sea murmurs to itself. You can almost imagine it thinking, planning even. A gull glides overhead, lets out a half-hearted cry, and drifts inland, unimpressed. At your feet lies what used to be a road, cracked stone leading toward the water, each slab carved with faint spirals and shell patterns. The designs shimmer when the foam washes over them, glints of gold peeking through the silt. You crouch down, brush away some sand, and there, embedded in the stone, is a tiny trident symbol, Poseidon's mark. You might call it branding, but gods never needed a marketing team. Historians still argue whether Atlantis was an empire, an island, or just an allegory Plato invented to win an argument about ethics. Either way, the image of a shining city beneath the waves is stubborn. It lingers like a melody you can't forget. Every generation tries to build it again, in marble, in story, in dreams. For now, though, you're here, at the beginning, when Atlantis still stood. Picture it in the pale blue dawn. Terraces of polished stone rising from the sea, silver fish darting through water channels, banners of sea silk fluttering between towers. The air hums with construction noise, chisels tapping, pulleys creaking, voices calling measurements that no one agrees on. A mainstream historical fact. The idea of Atlantis likely began with Egyptian records of older, drowned coastal cities. Plato might have twisted that into his story. Ancient Greek engineers, meanwhile, were quite real. They built harbors, temples, and even primitive cranes that could lift entire marble columns. They were practical dreamers, the kind who'd look at a volcano and think, that's a good place for a house. And tonight, you're walking among their spiritual cousins, the architects of Atlantis, handpicked by Poseidon himself. You can almost hear him in the distance, pacing the surf, trident tapping like an impatient teacher's pointer. He has opinions. He always does. The air shimmers faintly. A shape rises from the waves, a vast figure in bronze-green armor, beard streaming like kelp, eyes brighter than lightning reflected on water. Poseidon. The sea hisses around his ankles as he surveys the coastline. He looks proud, but also slightly suspicious, as though he already expects something to go wrong. Perfect, he mutters. Almost. He runs a hand through his beard and narrows his gaze at the half-built harbor. You follow his line of sight. The outer wall curves beautifully, but not exactly in the divine ratio he prefers. A mortal architect, barefoot, sunburned, clutching a wax tablet, waits nearby. He's been awake for 3 days straight. It's just a degree off, Poseidon says. Maybe two. I'll feel it every time the tide rolls in. The architect, whose name you later learn is Callan, swallows hard. We could shift the foundation? Poseidon shakes his head. No, that's what earthquakes are for. You stifle a laugh, earning a suspicious glance from a passing dolphin. Even the marine life here seems judgmental. The god moves on, examining statues of himself, some flattering, others less so. One depicts him heroically saving sailors. Another shows him glaring at a ship that dared to be too far from shore. He stops before a third statue, smaller, plumper, and clearly the work of an artist with no fear of divine retribution. Poseidon squints. Why do I look like I swallowed a barrel? Callan stammers, that one was meant for the, fountain district. Ah, Poseidon says dryly. A self-portrait then. He strides off, leaving footprints that fill instantly with seawater. Behind him, workers exchange looks of relief and exhaustion. One murmurs, "At least he didn't throw the trident this time." Another replies, "Yet." The city hums with nervous energy. Everywhere you turn, there's movement. Cranes hauling, horses dragging, people arguing about symmetry. It's a beautiful chaos, the kind that only happens when too many geniuses share one blueprint. You pause at a high terrace overlooking the harbour. The sun climbs higher now, scattering light across the waves like spilled coins. For a moment, everything looks perfect. You can almost believe this city will last forever. But the sea never keeps promises. Down below, you spot a ripple. Too steady, too rhythmic to be natural. A deep, unseen current pressing against the harbour wall. The masons don't notice. The dolphins do, but they say nothing. Somewhere behind you, Poseidon hums, low and thoughtful. Maybe, he says, we should have built it higher. The mortals glance at one another, but pretend not to hear. After all, when a god begins to doubt his own project, there's only one polite response: keep working. You stand there as the wind picks up, carrying the smell of salt, wet stone, and pride. The city shimmers in the morning light, dazzling and fragile, and you realize that every masterpiece begins as a rumor of failure. For now, though, Atlantis, or whatever name they called it then, still stands. The marble gleams, the gulls scream, the sea god paces, and the builders whisper prayers to every deity except the one supervising them. You wander deeper into the city as the morning fog lifts, revealing half-finished towers and scaffolds that creak like old ships. Salt hangs in the air. It coats your tongue with that metallic tang of brine and ambition. The soundscape is a mixture of hammering, splashing, and divine sighs. A whole civilization mid-construction, mid-complaint. Here, at the edge of the harbour, the architects of the deep are gathered around a wide marble slab that doubles as both a table and a target for Poseidon's temper. They're brilliant, exhausted, and perpetually damp. Their leader, Callan, the same mortal who survived yesterday's design critique, is hunched over a wax tablet, scrawled with spirals, numbers, and notes like less coral, more marble. You watch as Callan traces a line through wet wax, explaining to his crew that the next level of the temple must honor the god's taste. He likes columns that look like waves, strong, tall, and ready to crash. One of the younger architects blinks. So, irregular? Precisely, Callan says, but symmetrical. It's the kind of instruction that drives mortal minds to the brink. They nod anyway. You've seen this look before. It's the ancient equivalent of a meeting that should have been an email. The workers shuffle through piles of limestone blocks, each labelled with numbers that only make sense in Callan's handwriting. One man carries a basket of tools, Another mixes plaster using seawater that foams ominously. You notice the subtle detail. Their tunics are dyed pale blue to honor the sea god, but after weeks of work, they're all the same shade of salt-streaked grey. A mainstream historical fact drifts in like a thought bubble. Greek architecture really did rely on geometric precision and optical illusions. Columns were deliberately curved to look straight under sunlight, floors subtly sloped to channel rain. These ancient designers were mathematicians, philosophers, and part-time illusionists. If anyone could please a god obsessed with aesthetics, it would be them. And yet, something about the scene feels precarious. You sense that Poseidon's standards aren't measured in cubits or symmetry, but in emotion. Tides, moods, whim. He changes his mind like the sea changes its current. Callan wipes his brow and leans against a half-finished column. "We've given him everything," he mutters. Pearl-inlaid doors, coral fountains, ceilings high enough for his ego. A second architect replies softly, "Maybe that's the problem. If he has nothing left to desire, he'll have to destroy something instead." You can't help but chuckle, and the sound echoes strangely through the hall. The builders pause, glance up, as if sensing that laughter might summon a divine performance review. Right on cue, the ground trembles. Not violently, just enough to rattle tools and self-confidence. Dust sprinkles from the ceiling. "He's awake," someone whispers. Moments later, Poseidon strides in, leaving damp footprints that hiss against the hot stone. His trident glows faintly, and he looks suspiciously cheerful, which is somehow more terrifying than anger. "Progress," he booms. "Show me progress." Calon gestures nervously to the model, a delicate miniature city carved from beeswax and coral. The god crouches, squints, and tilts his head like a critic at a student exhibit. For a long time, he says nothing. Then, the light is wrong. "The sun rises the same for everyone, Lord," Callan ventures. "Not for me," Poseidon replies, tracing a clawed fingertip along the wax rooftops. "I like it from the west. Reverse the city." The architects exchange looks of despair. Reverse the city. The canals, the docks, the temples, all mirrored. That's not just labor, that's sacrilege against geometry itself. Still, Callan bows. "Of course. We'll, speak with the surveyors." Poseidon stands tall, satisfied. "Good. I knew I could count on my artisans." Of the deep he turns, pauses, and adds over his shoulder, "Oh, and the dolphins say the acoustics in the lower plaza are dreadful." And just like that, he's gone, vanishing into a mist of sea spray and managerial chaos. You stand among the stunned architects, who are now frantically updating sketches. One of them mutters, "Do you think he'll notice if we just turn him around instead?" "Shh," Callan hisses, glancing nervously toward the water. In the distance, you hear the slow crash of waves, the god's heartbeat, steady and omnipresent. A fringe mythological tidbit floats into your mind. Some legends claimed Poseidon created earthquakes by striking the ground when mortals displeased him. Others argued the quakes were just his laughter shaking the seabed. Historians still argue whether that detail reflects reverence or fear, or a bit of both. As the sun climbs higher, the marble gleams almost painfully bright. The architects, squinting, continue drawing on their wax tablets. They use reeds dipped in squid ink. The smell alone could keep them awake for days. You wander between half-built walls, where echoes bounce like waves in miniature. From somewhere nearby comes the steady rhythm of chisels. Tick, tick, tick. Each sound carries hope, precision, and maybe a hint of denial. Calon straightens and looks toward the sea. He'll never be satisfied, will he? No, says another. But at least he pays in pearls. You can't tell if that's sarcasm or optimism. Probably both. The breeze picks up, fluttering the builders' tunics and scattering loose sheets of papyrus across the worksite. One flutters towards you. You catch it mid-air. It's a sketch. A spiral tower crowned with shells, surrounded by notes in frantic handwriting. At the top, someone has written, "Make it more divine." You look out at the horizon, where the water darkens into that peculiar shade of deep blue-green that only Poseidon owns. Somewhere beneath that surface, something stirs, not yet angry, but curious. The architects return to work, muttering geometry and prayers in equal measure. The sea breathes, the stone hums, and you begin to feel that inevitable truth. This city might already be doomed by its own ambition. For now, though, it stands, bright, wet, and full of hubris, and Poseidon, somewhere offshore, smiles the smile of a god who knows the ending, but enjoys the middle act too much to skip ahead. By the time you reach the central courtyard, the morning sun has turned the whole city into a glittering reflection pool. Every wall throws back light like a mirror, and you find yourself squinting at your own hazy outline on polished marble. The architects, still awake from Poseidon's last suggestion, huddle under a half-built colonnade, sketching blueprints that seem to get more complicated by the minute. They've spread their plans across the floor, a patchwork of papyrus sheets weighed down by broken seashells and jars of ink. You crouch beside them. The drawings are dizzying, spirals nested in spirals, stairways that seem to lead both up and down, courtyards shaped like whirlpools. There's genius here, but also something that feels unsteady. Is it supposed to lean like that? You ask, pointing to one of the towers. Calon sighs, rubbing his temples. It's an optical illusion, he says, which is what every architect says when gravity becomes a philosophical question. Behind him, another craftsman mixes more squid ink, deep, oily black that smells faintly of the sea. He dips a reed pen and begins to redraw a wall, muttering about divine symmetry. His strokes are quick, fluid, half prayer and half panic. You watch the ink bead on the papyrus and spread, bleeding into fine threads that look like veins. A faint gust passes through the open square, stirring the edges of the blueprints. One sheet catches air and flips, revealing the backside, where a child's drawing of a fish grins up at you. Someone's apprentice must have been bored. You smile. The city might be doomed, but at least the interns have spirit. A mainstream historical fact swims to the surface of your mind. Greek builders often use full-scale floor sketches on stone slabs before laying foundations. They'd carve outlines directly into the ground, filling them with pigment or charcoal to mark proportions. The process was almost ritualistic, geometry as prayer. Here in Atlantis, it feels like that and more. The very act of drawing seems to wake the air, as if the sea god's energy hums in every line. The floor trembles faintly under your palms, just once, then settles. Callan freezes. Did anyone else feel that? It's just the tide, someone says, though the tide is several streets away. They return to work, though every pen stroke now seems cautious, tentative, like tiptoeing through a thunderstorm. You drift toward a low wall overlooking the harbour. From here, you can see the ocean stretching infinite and calm. But beneath that calm, you sense movement, something vast brushing against the city's foundations, testing, probing. The ripples it leaves are barely visible, but the seabirds notice. They circle tighter, crying warnings that no one translates. You glance back at the courtyard. The architects are arguing again, not angrily, but with the weary intensity of people who know they're sketching for an audience that doesn't sleep. The angles don't align, one says. They did before he asked us to flip the city. Then maybe we flip the drawings again. That's how we lost the last apprentice. You stifle a laugh, but a faint rumble in the ground wipes it from your lips. Dust slips from a lintel. A distant echo rises from the harbour, a sound like a sigh or a wave remembering its weight. Calon stares out to sea. He's watching. And indeed, the water's edge glows faintly green. Somewhere below, Poseidon must be pacing the ocean floor, inspecting their progress through walls of coral and light. His curiosity presses against the city like a tide, reshaping everything without ever touching it. You notice a small shrine at the corner of the courtyard, a basin filled with shells and coins, offerings from the workers. You kneel to look closer. Most of the coins are worn smooth, their faces erased by salt and time. A single line of fresh text is scratched into the marble beneath. May the sea forgive symmetry. You can't help but grin. One of the architects catches you looking. That's from the masons, he says. They started carving jokes now. It helps. The smell of fresh plaster and wet limestone fills the air. A gull swoops low, steals a fish from a builder's lunch, and escapes with a triumphant squawk. The moment feels absurdly peaceful. A pause between tempests. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some later myths claimed Poseidon once flooded a mortal city after its builders boasted they could hold back the sea. Scholars still argue whether that's about divine punishment or just bad coastal planning. Either way, the echo fits. Calon sets down his pen and exhales. We're not just building a city, he murmurs. We're building a mirror. And the thing about mirrors is, they always crack where they reflect the most. You stand beside him, the both of you staring at the sea as it breathes against the stone. A swell rolls in, kisses the lower steps, and slides back with a hiss, as though making a quiet promise. The sky darkens slightly, even though it's not yet noon. A passing shadow, a cloud, or something larger, deeper, moving beneath. The air tastes like metal and rain. The architects pack up their blueprints, weighing them with stones this time. No one wants their God-reviewed homework swept away. You walk away from the courtyard, past the scaffolds that moan in the wind. The faint scent of brine grows stronger, heavier. It clings to the walls, to the back of your throat. You don't look back, but you feel it. The first stirrings of a story that won't end well. You return to the harbour later that day, when the heat has turned the air to glass, and the waves barely dare to move. The city gleams under the sun like a jewel left too long on a windowsill, bright, proud, and moments from cracking. And there, standing at the edge of the water with one sandaled foot in the surf, is Poseidon himself. He's inspecting. Again. His armour glints a shade of greenish bronze, like sunlight through deep water, and the curls of his beard drip with seawater that never dries. The god looks every inch the master of oceans, and none of the patience of a foreman. Around him, the architects stand in a semicircle, trying not to look terrified. Calon leads them, clutching the latest model of the temple, a delicate wax and shell creation sitting precariously on a table of driftwood. Poseidon circles the model slowly. His trident rests across his shoulders like a lazy yawn. He says after a long pause that lasts exactly 12 heartbeats. You've changed the stairs. Yes, my lord, Calon says. We aligned them with the western light as requested. Poseidon leans close, examining. The steps are too shallow. I want them to sound grand. Sound. When I walk up, mortals should hear the waves in their bones. Calon blinks. We'll, adjust the acoustics. The god smiles faintly, a curl of tide and menace. Good. I like enthusiasm. He straightens, turns to face the city, and gestures with his trident. You mortals build as if eternity were measured in marble. But the sea teaches humility. It polishes pride into sand. A gull lands on his shoulder, perhaps mistaking him for a rock, and immediately regrets it when Poseidon flicks it away with one finger. The bird squawks indignantly, flaps off toward the cliffs, and everyone collectively decides not to laugh. Poseidon's mood, for now, seems calm enough. You can tell he's pleased, though in the vague way a cat might be pleased with a bird still trying to escape. He walks toward the edge of the harbour where the great breakwall curves like a crescent moon. His trident tip drags along the stone, leaving glowing blue trails that sizzle faintly before fading. "You've done well," he murmurs, but the wall feels wrong. Too straight. Callan glances at the structure, nearly a mile long. "It follows the coast, Lord." "Then the coast should have followed me." There's no good response to that. You can almost hear the collective thought. We can't move the coastline. Poseidon stops, looks at the horizon, and says, "The sea will fix it." He says it lightly, but the phrase lands like a warning. A mainstream fact drifts in. Ancient Greek builders often sought divine approval for harbors and temples through rituals of libation and sacrifice, asking the gods to bind the structure to the land. Without such favor, it was believed the sea itself could reclaim the work. Standing here, you understand how those superstitions began. Poseidon kneels and presses his palm against the stone. A low hum spreads through the wall, a sound like distant thunder underwater. When he lifts his hand, there's a perfect imprint glowing faintly beneath the surface, spiraling like coral. "There," he says, "now the city breathes." You glance down and realize the tide has crept in, lapping at your ankles. It feels cooler now, restless. The god turns to Callan again. "Tell me," he says softly, "did you design the temples to praise me, or to impress each other?" Callan hesitates, knowing this is a trap. "To praise you, my lord." Poseidon tilts his head. You mortals always say that after the first inspection." He walks away, trident slicing small ripples into the water, leaving the architect standing in uneasy silence. A breeze picks up, and one of the models, a fragile tower made of wax, topples over, melting slightly under the sun. Callan watches it slide, sighs, and mutters, "Well, at least now it looks more organic." A fringe myth tickles your memory. There was once a city that Poseidon raised from the sea as a gift to a mortal queen. When she mocked the noise of his waves, he dragged it back under before sunset. Historians still argue whether the story was meant as a moral about pride or about the hazards of waterfront real estate. The waves slap harder against the docks now, like applause at a performance that might end badly. The architects start gathering their tools, and you help stack a few tablets onto a cart. One of them, a young apprentice with seaweed tangled in his hair, glances at the horizon. "He'll do it again, won't he?" "Do what?" you ask. "Forget that we're the ones building it." He's not wrong. Gods forget. Or maybe they remember too much. The failures, the flaws, the tiny insults of imperfection. You look back toward Poseidon, now a shimmering silhouette against the sunlight. He seems both magnificent and lonely, an artist who can't stop editing his masterpiece. A low rumble rolls through the ground, just a tremor, but enough to make dust fall from the scaffolds. The sea retreats, then rushes forward again with a crash that drenches everyone's sandals. The architects groan. Poseidon doesn't even glance back. "Test complete," he says. "You'll fix it." And then he vanishes into the surf, dissolving into mist like he was never there. The apprentices stare after him, dripping. One mutters, "Maybe next time we should just build a raft." You stand there, half amused, half awed. The city gleams under the hard sun, its marble slick with seawater and divine ego. Somewhere deep below, the ocean shifts, already whispering about what it might take back. You can feel it in the soles of your feet. Perfection built on the patience of a god is never meant to last. The next morning dawns murky and thick, the kind of grey that makes every marble surface look like it's waiting for an apology. Down by the harbour, the builders shuffle in with slumped shoulders and swollen eyes. No one has slept, not after yesterday's test. A small crowd of apprentices gather around a half-empty amphora of watered wine, Poseidon's least favourite mortal invention, but the workers' only defence against divine management. They sip quietly, each lost in a fog of exhaustion and salt. Callan appears soon after, his hair stiff with dried seawater and his tablet tucked under one arm. He looks like a man who's forgotten what approval feels like. "All right," he sighs. "We've been blessed with another day to disappoint a god. Let's get to it." They chuckle weakly, which, considering their circumstances, is practically optimism. You stand nearby, watching the city breathe. It's beautiful, still. Arches rising like frozen waves, courtyards lined with pearl mosaics, staircases curling upward toward nothing yet. But there's something beneath the beauty now, a tension you can taste. The sea hums, faint but constant, a warning note under every hammer's rhythm. At the end of the pier, a pot of steaming porridge bubbles beside a small brazier. Someone's grandmother, it seems, took pity on the night shift. You can smell barley, honey, and salt. It's almost comforting. Almost. Callan crouches beside the fire, warming his hands. "We've got 2 days before the Festival of Foundations," he mutters. He'll want everything perfect. Or perfectly ruined. Depends on the tide. A young mason laughs nervously. Maybe he'll forget. "He's the god of memory's brother," Callan says. "He doesn't forget, he just delays the punishment." Another sip of wine circulates. The men talk about everything except architecture, their children, the fish that refuse to bite lately, rumors of dolphins speaking in dreams. You wander among them, invisible in their weary rhythm. The clang of tools becomes hypnotic, the scrape of stone against stone like waves grinding shells. Every so often, someone drops a hammer and half the team flinches, just in case it's thunder instead. A mainstream historical fact. Greek builders often scheduled construction pauses for festivals, believing that work under divine observation risked insult if mortals seemed too proud. In practice, those pauses were just tired workers pretending ritual while secretly catching up on repairs. Tradition and exhaustion, hand in hand. Here, though, there's no rest. Poseidon's temple must gleam by sunset. The scaffolds tremble under hands that no longer care about geometry, and above them gulls circle, gossiping in cruel voices. You spot a group of carpenters debating over a cracked beam. "It'll hold," one insists. "Unless he sneezes," another replies. They all nod, solemnly. Nearby, a young woman, one of the scribes, sits cross-legged with a reed pen, jotting every complaint onto wet clay. "Just for the record," she says, "if we vanish, someone should know it wasn't a flood. It was management." You smile. Historians would appreciate the clarification. She smirks, assuming there'll still be historians. From the sea, a low rumble interrupts the conversation. The workers freeze. Even the gulls pause mid-air. For a long moment, nothing happens. Then, like a lazy heartbeat, the sound fades. Someone exhales. "Probably whales," Callan says, "or guilt." The porridge on the brazier bubbles over, and the scent of burned honey fills the air. "That's an omen," mutters the oldest mason. "Sweet things burn first." The apprentices roll their eyes, but you can tell the words stick. Omens thrive in places where sleep doesn't. A fringe tidbit surfaces from memory. Ancient Greek seers sometimes interpreted the sea's color at dawn to predict divine moods. A dull green meant patience. Grey meant stay home. The waters today are grey, streaked with silver veins like cracks in glass. Historians still argue whether those beliefs were practical weather sense or just poetic anxiety. You're leaning toward the latter. Callan stands, dusts his hands, and shouts to the team, "All right, people, let's build like we believe in miracles." A few half-hearted cheers echo back. Someone toasts the air with a wooden mallet. The work begins again. Chisels tapping, pulleys whining, ropes creaking. The music of desperation. You climb a nearby scaffold for a better view. From here, the city looks alive, a living coral reef of human will. Below, canals shimmer like veins of quicksilver, and the distant statue of Poseidon rises from the plaza, trident raised toward an indifferent sky. The heat builds. Sweat runs in rivulets down stone and skin alike. By midday, the workers strip to tunics, their shoulders gleaming under the sun. Laughter drifts through the air, brittle but brave. Someone starts a song, a slow rhythmic chant about architects and divine deadlines. It's tuneless and wonderful. Then a shadow passes over the city. You look up, no clouds, just a subtle darkening of light. The sea god must have turned his gaze this way again. The air thickens, heavy with static. The song fades. Callan closes his eyes, whispers something too soft to catch. The tremor comes again, slight but enough to sway the hanging scaffolds. Tools rattle, everyone holds their breath, and then, just as quickly, calm returns. The sun re-emerges, glaring and bright. Work resumes as it always does. By dusk, the city glows honey gold. Fires burn along the waterfront, their reflections stretching across the water like molten bronze. The workers collapse where they stand, tools still in hand. Somewhere behind you, Callan murmurs, "Maybe tomorrow he'll like it." You don't answer. The waves are whispering again, soft and patient, as though they already know the ending. For now, though, the city stands, half divine, half mortal, held together by hubris and honey. Night settles like a cool veil over the city, brushing away the day's glare and revealing the quiet rhythm beneath. Lanterns glow in soft clusters along the canals, their reflections trembling with each ripple of water. From the hills above, the marble towers look like candles half melted by time. You can hear the distant crash of waves beyond the harbour walls. Steady, breathing, a heartbeat beneath stone. You walk alone through the narrow streets. The air smells of salt and wet limestone, and the silence is so deep that even your footsteps sound like questions. The festival preparations have stilled for the night. The workers sleep in hammocks strung between pillars or beside half-carved statues, tools still in hand. Somewhere, a dog barks once and gives up. Then you hear it, that whisper beneath the waves. It begins low, like a sigh underfoot. The cobbles seem to hum faintly. You pause, crouch, and press your hand to the ground. There's warmth there. Not fire, but friction, as if the earth and sea are arguing softly beneath your palm. The sound swells and fades again, almost like whale song, but too precise, too deliberate. From the docks, a pale mist begins to rise. It slides between columns and curls through doorways, silver in the moonlight. You follow it down toward the harbour, where the tide has come in higher than usual, licking at the lowest steps. Callan is already there, wrapped in a cloak, staring out at the water. His face is a map of exhaustion and awe. "You hear it too?" he asks without turning. "I thought it was the wind." He shakes his head. The sea speaking again. Not to him this time, to us. You listen. The whisper deepens into a rhythm. 3 short pulses, 1 long. It repeats, faint but clear. It could be the current scraping rock, or something alive. They say whales carry memories, Callan murmurs. Old songs from drowned worlds. You look out to sea. The horizon flickers with faint green light, like lightning trapped underwater. For a moment, you glimpse movement. Something massive gliding just below the surface. The water bulges, then smooths again. The moon catches on the crest of a wave, turning it silver. The reflection stretches towards you like a path. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek sailors often interpreted underwater sounds, earthquakes, whale calls, bubbling vents, as voices of gods. They built shrines near such places, calling them gates to the deep. Scientists now know those hums came from tectonic plates, but standing here, you understand why they heard something divine. The mist thickens, shapes form within it. Faint outlines of columns, doorways, arches that mirror the city behind you. For a heartbeat, you see another Atlantis, ghostly and inverted, floating on the surface of the sea. Callan gasps. It's us, he whispers. Our reflection. Our warning. The water shivers and the image breaks apart. A soft laugh echoes across the waves, low, amused, unmistakably divine. Poseidon's voice rolls through the mist, deep as thunder softened by distance. Working late, my little masons. You and Callan both freeze. The air tastes like iron. From the water a shape rises. Not the full god this time, just the glow of his trident slicing upward through the surface. Its tips drip phosphorescent light. The glow flickers once, twice, like an impatient heartbeat. You've done well, Poseidon says, but the sea never sleeps, and neither should her city. The trident taps the water once. A ring of ripples spreads outward, touching the docks and making them groan. Callan bows deeply, voice trembling. We live to serve, Lord of Waves. The god murmurs. We shall see. The glow sinks back beneath the surface. Silence follows. Not peaceful, but waiting. You both remain there long after he's gone. The mist fades. The whisper returns, softer now, like a lullaby hummed by something vast and tired. Finally, Callan straightens, rubbing his arms. He's restless. The deep's moving. Maybe it's just the tide. He gives you a long look. There's no just when you work for gods. You walk together through the quiet streets, past the sleeping workers and half-finished fountains. Every puddle reflects the moon perfectly, as though the city has already begun to memorize the sky it will one day mirror from beneath the waves. A fringe tidbit. Later, Greek legends spoke of listening stones, blocks said to retain echoes of the world before the flood. Historians still argue whether those were real acoustic experiments or metaphors for memory. Here, in these trembling walls, you'd believe either. You reach the central plaza, where the new statue of Poseidon waits under a veil of linen, ready to be revealed at the festival. The fabric shifts gently, as if something beneath it is breathing. Callan stops to adjust one of the torches, then says quietly, "He'll come again soon." He always does when he's proud or angry. Which do you think this was? He gives a tired smile. Both. They always come as a pair. A sudden gust flutters the veil. For an instant, you see the statue's face. Serene, flawless, far too human. Then the fabric settles again. You both stand there, listening to the faint sound rising from the harbour. Not thunder, not song, but something between. The city exhales with the sea. The stones themselves seem to pulse. Calon turns toward his workshop. "Get some rest," he says over his shoulder. "Tomorrow we pretend nothing happened. That's how mortals survive gods. You stay a while longer. The night deepens, the water glows faintly green, and the whisper beneath the waves fades into something almost kind. The sound of a world holding its breath before a dream or a disaster. Morning returns soft and golden, carrying the smell of wet stone and fresh flowers. The air hums with anticipation. The festival of foundations has begun. Everywhere you look, garlands of coral and ivy drape over half-finished columns, and the streets are scattered with rose petals, many already stuck to damp footprints. You wander through the main square, where workers have swapped chisels for lyres and amphorae of wine. They move like people caught between pride and superstition, smiling, but with one wary eye on the horizon. Even the gulls seem unusually polite today, circling in wide, slow arcs above the harbour. Calon stands at the heart of it all, nervously adjusting the drapery around the new statue of Poseidon. His tunic is cleaner than usual, but his hands still tremble faintly. "He'll want perfection," he mutters, to no one in particular, "at least for the first 10 minutes. Nearby, a group of musicians tune their instruments, plucking cautious notes that echo off the marble walls. Children chase each other around the fountain, splashing water onto their parents' robes. The whole city has the air of a stage set, moments before the curtain rises. A pair of priests approach carrying baskets of shells, offerings for the sea. They murmur blessings, tossing handfuls into the harbour. The shells scatter like snowflakes across the waves, and for a while, the water seems calm, even pleased. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts. Ancient Greek festivals often marked the completion of major construction projects, mixing gratitude and anxiety in equal measure. Sacrifices to Poseidon included bulls, goats, or small golden models of ships, anything to remind the god of his better moods. Here, the ritual feels half celebratory, half desperate. The architects are smiling too wide, the priests chanting a little too loudly. Even the dolphins offshore seem to be watching warily, dorsal fins slicing the water like punctuation marks in a nervous sentence. You drift toward a long banquet table laden with figs, bread, honey, and far too much watered wine. A mason lifts a cup and toasts, "To the city that defied the sea, and may the sea never notice." Everyone laughs. It's the kind of joke that sounds brave until the tide comes in. Callan joins you, rubbing the back of his neck. "We shouldn't mock him," he says quietly. "He listens." "Maybe he enjoys a good roast," you reply. He smirks despite himself. "If he does, it'll be us on the spit." From the temple terrace, the high priest raises his arms, calling for silence. The music fades, the laughter dies, and a hush sweeps over the crowd. The linen veil drops from the statue, revealing Poseidon in marble perfection. Every curl of beard, every muscle in gleaming detail. The god's expression is stern yet amused, as if aware that this is only a likeness, not nearly dramatic enough for his taste. The crowd gasps, then cheers. Trumpets sound. Incense smoke drifts skyward, twisting into shapes that briefly resemble waves. For a moment, everything feels right. Divine approval seems almost possible. But then, faintly, you hear it. That whisper beneath the waves again. Louder now, closer. A ripple spreads across the harbour's surface, concentric and deliberate. The priests pause mid-chant. The trumpets falter. From somewhere deep below, a rumble answers. The marble underfoot vibrates, subtle but insistent, like the city's heartbeat skipping a beat. People glance at one another, unsure whether to pretend it's part of the ceremony. Calon meets your eyes, his face pale. That's not in the schedule, he says. The rumble grows. Fountains shudder, spilling water onto the tiles. A few of the smaller statues tip over, catching themselves in flower garlands. The high priest raises his hands again, voice trembling. Behold, the god accepts our... The words cut off as a single crack slices through the air. A sharp, clean sound that seems to come from beneath the harbour itself. The crowd gasps. Everyone looks toward the water. For a moment, nothing happens. The sea glitters under the noon sun, calm and glassy. Then another crack, louder. You spot it. A thin fissure running along the inner wall of the harbour, tracing its way up like a vein. Seawater spurts through in tiny bursts. Calon whispers, he's testing it again. A third crack. This one echoes through the plaza like thunder. The statue wobbles on its base. The crowd stumbles back. Someone screams. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the tremors stop. Silence. Even the birds have gone still. A warm wind drifts through the square, carrying the smell of salt and something metallic. Like lightning before a storm. The crowd stands frozen. Finally, the high priest clears his throat. Blessing, he declares shakily. The god shows his strength. There's a murmur of forced agreement. People nod, raise cups, resume laughter that sounds more like prayer. The festival continues, but softer now. The songs subdued, the smiles careful. A fringe myth comes to mind. Poseidon was said to create earthquakes when mortals built too close to the sea, shaking the earth as a warning. Some tales say he laughed while doing it. Calling the tremors gentle reminders, historians still argue whether that was divine humor or mortal propaganda. As the sun dips lower, the festival lingers in uneasy joy. The wine flows, the music resumes, but you can feel the sea watching. Its rhythm syncs with your heartbeat. You leave the square, the sound of laughter fading behind you, and look back once from the edge of the docks. The statue gleams in the sunset, half shadowed, half gold, and beneath it, in the water's reflection, you swear you see the same statue, cracked, half buried in sand. You blink, and it's gone. The waves roll in, soft and slow. The god hasn't struck yet. He's just reminding everyone that he could. By dawn the next morning, the garlands have wilted, and the incense ash lies thick on the marble steps. The festival of foundations is over, but the tension it left behind hums like a harp string. The air feels charged, waiting. The gulls don't even bother crying. They just drift, silent, as if eavesdropping. You find Calon standing near the temple colonnade, staring at the horizon with a look halfway between awe and resignation. The light on the water is pale and cold, and there's a smell of ozone that shouldn't be there. He's been quiet too long, Calon murmurs. You follow his gaze. The sea is calm, perfectly calm. No ripples, no wind, just the still mirror of blue glass stretching to forever. It's too calm. Then a single wave rises, distant but massive, lifting slowly like the inhalation of a sleeping beast. It doesn't break. It simply folds back into itself, rolling outward in slow motion, a reminder of the scale of Poseidon's patience. The workers gather around, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Someone whispers, "Is that normal?" Normal, Calon replies, is a word the gods don't know. A low vibration passes through the ground. It's not violent yet. It's like the earth testing its voice. You hear distant bells clanging as the tremor reaches the harbour. The cranes sway slightly, ropes creaking. The masons cross themselves, muttering small prayers to every deity except the one currently in a mood. And then you hear it, a faint splash, then another, then hundreds. The fish are leaping out of the water all at once, as if trying to escape something below. The sight is mesmerizing. Silver scales flashing in the morning light. A living rain of panic. Poseidon rises. Not fully, just his upper form, enormous and shimmering, surf cascading off his shoulders like rivers of glass. His trident glows white-hot. His expression, unfortunately, is not encouraging. "Good morning," he says in a tone that makes you wish it weren't. The architects kneel instinctively, some still clutching tools. Calon bows so low his forehead nearly touches the wet stone. Poseidon's gaze sweeps the city. Lovely. Truly, I almost recognize it. "Thank you, Lord," Calon stammers. The god tilts his head. Almost. He taps his trident once against the sea. The sound rings through every canal, echoing in the marble bones of the city. Somewhere, a small statue falls with a faint clink. "You've built well," Poseidon continues. "But tell me, mortals, when the sea rose yesterday, why did you not ask me to stop it?" Calon looks up, startled. We, uh, we trusted your will, my lord." "Trusted?" Poseidon leans forward. "Or feared?" No one answers. The silence stretches until even the waves seem embarrassed. The god smiles faintly, amused. "Ah, honesty through terror, my favorite form of prayer." He steps closer, and the water beneath him surges, lifting the harbor slightly before settling again. The city groans. "I asked you to build me a temple strong enough to endure the tides," he says. "I did not ask you to make it prettier than Olympus." Calon opens his mouth, then wisely closes it again. A gull lands on the god's trident and squawks. Poseidon flicks it away without looking. "Even the birds admire your arrogance," he says dryly. He walks toward the sea wall, trident dragging behind him, leaving trails of glowing salt. "Tell me, builders," he says without turning, "what would happen if the sea decided to breathe inward instead of out?" Calon hesitates. "The city would drown." "Good. You understand." A mainstream historical fact slips into your thoughts. The myth of Poseidon as Earthshaker wasn't just poetic. Greek sailors actually used seismic patterns to time harvests and migrations, associating underwater tremors with divine moods. When the earth moved, so did everyone's plans. You glance at the workers. They're all frozen in quiet terror. The god's shadow covers the harbor, stretching long and dark across the bright stone. Poseidon lifts his trident again. The tips spark with light, brighter this time. The sea quivers like glass about to crack. Calon throws himself forward, shouting, "Lord, please, if we've offended you, tell us how to fix it." The god's gaze softens slightly. "Ah, a mortal question. How to fix perfection?" He lowers the trident to the water's surface, and the sea begins to swirl in slow circles. The current coils around the docks, rising and falling like a living spiral. "Perfection," Poseidon says, "is a kind of insult. The moment you finish something, it begins to die. You should have left it unfinished like the tide." He turns, eyes glowing faintly blue. "Consider this, a revision." The trident hums once, low and resonant. The water pulls back, stretching the harbor's edge like fabric. You can see the seafloor exposed for just a moment. Coral, shells, the shimmering bones of fish. And then the sea returns with a roar. The wave slams against the walls, sprays across the plaza, drenches everyone in salt. Statues topple, cranes collapse. The marble cracks, not shattered, but wounded. Poseidon smiles. "Better," he says softly. "Now it breathes." Calon rises slowly, soaked and shaking. "As you wish, Lord." Poseidon regards him for a moment, unreadable. Then he sinks back into the sea, his form dissolving into mist and foam. The harbour stills again. The silence that follows is heavier than noise. You can hear nothing but the drip of water from rooftops and the faint crackle of broken torches. A fringed tidbit drifts up from some forgotten myth. Poseidon once claimed the sea erases arrogance faster than time ever could. Historians still argue whether that was humility or just brand management. The workers begin picking through the debris, quietly, methodically. No one complains. They simply rebuild, as mortals always do, pretending they weren't just lectured by the ocean itself. Callan watches the tide crawl back into its bed and mutters, "He won't stop now." You can't tell if it's prophecy or dread. Maybe both. The sun emerges from behind a cloud, glinting on the wet marble. For a brief, fleeting moment, the city looks whole again. Then a distant crack, barely audible, reminds you that perfection doesn't survive Poseidon's attention for long. You wake to the sound of groaning stone. Not human groans, but deep architectural ones, like the city itself is sighing in its sleep. The morning light is strange, the color of tarnished bronze. The sky hangs low and heavy, as though it too might collapse. You step out into the main street. Water pools in the grooves between cobbles. Somewhere, a distant scaffold creaks, then falls with a splash. The air tastes of salt and dust. You can feel it in your ribs, that thick silence that comes right before something gives way. Callan is already awake, perched on a broken step, staring at the harbour. He looks smaller now, shrunken not by age, but by understanding. "He's done with testing," he says softly. "Now he's grading." Out at sea, the surface shifts again. Not violently, but persistently, like a thought the ocean can't let go of. A faint spiral forms, widening. It pulls the morning fog into its orbit until the horizon looks like it's spinning. Callan stands. "Everyone inside the temple," he shouts. "Get off the docks." Workers scatter, slipping on wet stone. The air hums. You can feel it in your teeth. One of the cranes buckles, its ropes whipping like angry serpents. A cart of limestone blocks tips into the water with a tremendous splash, sending up a mist that smells like metal and algae. Then, from far below, comes a rumble, deep, layered, alive. The sea god is awake again. The first wave hits not with violence, but grace. It rises slow, arching over the harbour wall before folding itself delicately across the plaza. It rolls between the pillars, curling around statues, caressing the marble like an artist admiring his work. For one impossible moment, it's beautiful. Water and stone moving in harmony. Then comes the second wave. It doesn't admire, it consumes. The harbour wall fractures with a deafening crack. You watch in awe as entire slabs of marble shift, sliding apart like puzzle pieces, suddenly remembering they were never meant to fit. Water rushes in, filling every gap, every secret chamber beneath the temple floors. People shout, some praying, others laughing in that strange way humans do when fear becomes absurdity. Poseidon's laughter rolls through the mist, soft, rich, dangerously amused. "Oh, Callan," he says, voice echoing through every ripple. "You built too well." The sea wants to live here. Callan looks up, defiant even as the ground trembles beneath him. "You said to make it breathe." "And it does," Poseidon replies, "just not air." The next quake throws you to your knees. Water sprays in sheets from broken aqueducts. Statues tilt and fall, their faces striking the marble with dull finality. The air fills with the sound of cracking, the pure, clear tone of stone surrendering. A mainstream fact drifts through your reeling thoughts. Earthquakes in ancient coastal cities were often followed by tsunamis, leading Greeks to call Poseidon the earth shaker. They didn't fear geology, they feared conversation with gods. Here, that fear is earned. The temple roof begins to buckle. Calon grabs your arm. We can reach the terrace. You run together through the half-flooded square. The water is rising fast, waist-deep already, swirling with debris. Planks, flowers, someone's lost sandal. You climb the steps two at a time, the marble slick beneath your hands. From the terrace, you can see it all. The city folding into the sea in slow, dreadful beauty. Towers slide gracefully into the waves. The great harbour gates collapse inward like a sigh. The sun glints on each falling block, turning ruin into something almost divine. Poseidon stands at the horizon, vast and luminous, his silhouette framed by lightning that dances without thunder. His trident is raised, but you sense hesitation. Not cruelty, not mercy, just inevitability. Calon shouts into the wind. Why build at all if you'll only destroy it? The god's voice rolls across the water. Because even ruins remember who made them. You want to protest, but your words are drowned by the roar of the next wave. It surges higher than before, swallowing the lower city entirely. The air becomes mist. The mist becomes rain. The rain becomes sea again. And yet, within the chaos, strange calm. You notice dolphins weaving through submerged arches, schools of silver fish darting through the gaps where doors used to be. A coral pattern begins to trace itself across the fallen columns, delicate as lace. Even in ruin, the sea decorates. A fringe myth flits through your mind. Poseidon never truly destroyed, he reclaimed. To mortals, that was punishment. To him, it was stewardship. Historians still argue whether that makes him the most creative or the most possessive of gods. Beside you, Calon sinks to his knees, drenched, defeated, but oddly serene. Maybe this was the plan all along, he whispers. A city not of stone, but of echoes. The water rises to your shins, then your knees. The terrace trembles. A statue behind you slides forward, splashes into the surf below. You turn to Calon. Will you rebuild it? He smiles faintly. He already is. The sea spreads out around you, glowing faintly in the fading light. Below the surface, you glimpse movement. Pillars still standing, arches bending gracefully, fish gliding where citizens once walked. It's beautiful. In that way, only loss can be. Then one final sound, the long, weary exhale of the city giving up its breath. The terrace slips. You feel the world tilt, and Atlantis, or whatever its name truly was, sinks, slow and elegant, into the arms of its creator. When you next open your eyes, you're surrounded by blue. Not sky blue, not paint blue, but that thick, living blue that folds the world in half. The water presses gently on every side, humming in your ears, turning your heartbeat into music. For a moment, you can't tell if you've drowned or been invited. Sunlight filters down in trembling columns, illuminating the ruins below. The city sleeps in perfect silence. Columns lean like tired sentinels. Courtyards gape open to the sea, and delicate tendrils of kelp curl through doorways that once held laughter. The air bubbles that escape your lips rise toward the shimmering surface, vanishing into liquid gold. Atlantis is gone, but it's still here too. You drift above it, light as thought. Around you, fish dart in glimmers of silver and green, weaving through the wreckage, as if rehearsing a dance. A shoal of bright orange wrasses spill through the broken windows of the temple, and one curious octopus crawls across a toppled column. tentacles exploring carvings worn soft by the tide. A marble statue lies face down in the sand. Its features are blurred, softened by salt. You brush your hand across its back, and flakes of gold leaf come away like glittering dust. The sea has claimed its tribute. From the distance comes a rumble. Faint this time, steady. You turn and see him. Poseidon moves through the water like a current in human form. His eyes burn pale as moonlight, and his hair floats around him in dark ribbons. His trident trails a comet of light through the murk. There's no anger in him now, only that terrifying calm of a creator reviewing his masterpiece. He passes above the ruins, gaze moving from temple to tower to plaza. "It's quieter this way," he murmurs, voice rippling through the water. "They always build noise." You float nearby, unsure if he sees you. He reaches down, touching the roof of a half-buried hall. The structure trembles, and from its cracks, bubbles escape like sighs. He watches them drift upward, then turns away. "They'll blame me, of course," he says. "They always do. But who built on borrowed land?" You want to answer, but your words dissolve into the current. He gestures with his trident, and a trail of gold dust swirls through the water, the remnants of the temple's once gilded ceiling. "See," he says, "still beautiful. Just quieter." A mainstream historical fact crosses your mind even here, as though the rational world refuses to stop whispering. Ancient Greek seafarers truly believed earthquakes and sinkings were signs of divine reclamation. Some cities built altars to Poseidon after every disaster, thanking him for reminding them who owned the sea. It's a strange kind of gratitude, one born from survival rather than faith. Poseidon drifts closer to the temple's fallen colonnade. Small fish circle him fearlessly, darting between the tines of his trident. Mortals, he muses, love permanence. But permanence is a lie the sea never tells. He glances up, toward the fading light above. They'll sing about this one day. Turn it into a warning, or a bedtime story. He looks right at you now, and for the first time, his gaze feels human, tired. You'll tell it gently, won't you? You nod, though you're not sure he needs the answer. He smiles, faint and wistful. "Good. Let them sleep with the sound of the tide, not the roar of it." The god dissolves into the blue, leaving only spirals of light and the faint shimmer of salt where he stood. All around, the ruins settle into peace. Coral begins its slow work, creeping along cracks, painting color back into the marble. A school of silver fish glides through a doorway, their tails leaving glittering trails. A starfish anchors itself to a fallen statue's cheek. The city isn't dying, it's just changing hands. Callan's voice drifts to you, not in sound, but in thought. "He didn't destroy it," he says, "he redecorated." You almost laugh. A fringe tidbit flickers across your mind. Some ancient philosophers claimed destruction was merely divine editing, that the gods remade the world each night while mortals slept, so nothing ever truly ended. Historians still argue whether that's myth or metaphor, but down here, surrounded by ruins blooming with new life, it feels true. You look once more at the temple, or what's left of it. The statue of Poseidon lies sideways now, his trident broken but still glowing faintly, casting soft light over the sand. Around it, fish gather as if paying tribute. You float upward, toward the surface, the blue fading to gold. The last thing you see below is the city breathing, calm, luminous, eternal in its quiet imperfection. As you break through the surface, the world explodes into sunlight and air. The waves are gentle again, rolling slow and steady. Behind you, Atlantis is gone from sight, but its memory lingers, humming in the rhythm of the sea. You take a deep breath of salt and warmth. The horizon stretches clean and endless. Somewhere far below, the god of the sea is smiling to himself, content with the silence he's made. The sea grows quiet. No more thunder beneath your feet. No tremors creeping up through the souls of the world. Only the hush of water rolling over stone, gentle as breath. You drift above what was once a harbor, now a shimmering labyrinth of coral and ruin. The surface above glows faintly gold, like a candle seen through silk. Down below, life has already begun to reclaim the silence. Tiny crabs skitter across the floor mosaics, carrying fragments of shell and pearl. An eel wriggles between two fallen columns, its body gleaming green against the marble. And there, inside what used to be the Great Hall, a school of fish swirls in a perfect spiral, mimicking the shape of Poseidon's trident. You hover, watching the ocean rewrite the story of Atlantis in slow motion. Then, as if on cue, a flicker of movement catches your eye. Not divine this time, but distinctly mortal. Two divers, their faces pale with awe, descend from the sunlit surface, their ropes trailing like spider silk. They're young, curious, unaware of the myth they've just stumbled into. One gestures toward the temple, the other nods. Together they swim closer, brushing away sand and algae. Their lanterns cast circles of light across inscriptions no one has read in thousands of years. You drift closer and see what they've uncovered. A clay tablet, remarkably intact, half buried near the statue's base. Callan's handwriting, curling and precise, etched deep into the clay. The divers carefully lift it, cradling it as though it might shatter at a touch. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. Greek artisans often recorded dedications or instructions on fired clay, sometimes sealing them within walls as messages to the gods. Archaeologists call them foundation tablets. Most never expected anyone but the divine to read them. As the divers turn the tablet toward the light, the words shimmer faintly in the sand-filtered glow. You read along silently. To whoever finds this, we built for beauty, not for eternity. If the sea has taken us, let it also remember us kindly. The God will forgive. The stones already have. You feel your chest tighten, not from pressure, but from something quieter, deeper, a kind of reverence. The divers exchange a look, though they can't possibly grasp the weight of the message. One gestures upward, the universal sign for let's bring this home. They kick toward the surface, their bubbles rising like a trail of punctuation. The moment they vanish into the light, the current shifts. The tablet's impression fades slightly, as if the sea itself has begun erasing it again. Not cruelly, just inevitably. You hear a faint laugh, carried on the tide, Poseidon, still amused, still watchful. Mortals, he murmurs somewhere far below, always rewriting my endings. A curious octopus crawls over to where the divers had been. It rests one tentacle on the disturbed sand and begins rearranging it into small, uneven circles. From above, they look almost like letters. A fringed tidbit surfaces. In later centuries, sailors told tales of the living ruins, places under the sea where shapes moved at night, forming new walls and pathways. Historians still argue whether those were hallucinations, currents, or some remnant of magic. Watching now, you're not sure the difference matters. You descend again, gliding past arches and windows that frame the endless blue. The light down here is dimmer, dreamlike, but the details are still vivid. Shells growing from broken pillars, tiny seahorses nesting in the cracks of old mosaics, coral flowers blooming where human feet once walked. Somewhere in the silt, you glimpse the faint outline of a harp, its frame crusted with barnacles. When the current moves just right, one of its strings still vibrates, playing a note so soft it could be a heartbeat. You close your eyes, letting the sound sink in. It's the same rhythm the builders once hammered to, the same cadence that echoed through scaffolds and courtyards, the sound of effort, devotion, and eventual surrender. The water drifts warmer here, carrying whispers of volcanic vents beneath. The sea is always building, even as it erases. You realize that Poseidon's words weren't arrogance at all. They were simply his version of truth. Creation is never still. Even silence reshapes. Something moves past your shoulder. A large shadow, graceful and slow. You turn, half expecting the god again, but it's only a manta ray, gliding serenely through the flooded streets like a monk through a cloister. Its wings brush against the statue's hand, stirring a cloud of silt that glitters in the dim light. You watch until it disappears into the deeper blue, and then, suddenly, you understand the strange peace of this place. The city hasn't vanished, it's just changed mediums. Stone into coral, breath into current, pride into story. You whisper, "Good night, Callan." The sea answers with a gentle wave, soft as a sigh. Above, sunlight ripples down through the water, sketching new patterns on the ancient stones. As if the sky itself is still admiring the ruins, the sun sinks toward the horizon, turning the sea into liquid amber. The divers have long gone, their air bubbles long faded. You drift slowly among the ruins, carried by the current like a leaf caught in a dream. All around you, the water glows faintly gold, the light bending through the surface in trembling ribbons. You find yourself near what remains of a library, or something that feels like one. Rows of stone niches line the walls, each once filled with scrolls that time has traded for sand. Small fish dart in and out of the empty slots like thoughts in motion. In one corner lies a sealed jar, half buried in silt. Its clay stopper has survived, though the paint is nearly gone. You brush your fingers along the side, revealing faint lettering in Greek. It reads simply, "For the God who never reads." You smile. Even in their final days, the architects had a sense of humor. You pry the jar loose and tilt it gently. Inside are fragments of clay tablets, carefully stacked. They're brittle and uneven, as though written in haste. Each bears a different name etched into the surface. The signatures of Poseidon's builders. These are their letters never sent. You read one aloud in the muffled quiet of the deep. "We have done all we could. If the sea must take this city, may it do so kindly. Tell the waves to be gentle on the rooftops." Another fragment reads, "My child, if you find this, know that your father built something beautiful once, and it almost lasted." The water trembles faintly, like an exhale from the deep. You glance upward, half expecting to see Poseidon again. But the surface remains calm, the light steady. Maybe the god is sleeping now. Maybe even he grows weary of endings. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. In ancient Greece, workers sometimes buried inscribed plaques or personal objects under temple floors as offerings for protection or remembrance. The idea was that the building itself would carry their stories, a way for mortals to carve their names into eternity without angering the gods by saying them too loudly. Here, in this underwater library of ghosts, those hopes still linger. The letters may never have been delivered, but the sea kept them safe. A gentle current pulls one tablet from your hand. It spins lazily, then drifts toward the open archway and out into the vast blue, where it will travel forever or dissolve completely. Somehow, both feel like the right ending. You swim onward through the ruins, feeling the water cool and deepen. The light dims, shifting from gold to green. The silence thickens until you can hear nothing but your own heartbeat echoing faintly in your ears. A coral-encrusted doorway opens into what was once a scribe's chamber. A wooden table still stands there, miraculously upright, covered in a thin film of sand. On it rests a stylus, its bronze tip dull but intact. You pick it up, turning it between your fingers. It feels strangely warm. For a moment, you imagine what it must have been like to sit here with the sea outside still held at bay, carving words into wax while the walls creaked and whispered. The sound of waves, the smell of salt, the hum of creation pressed against destruction. You find a fresh patch of sand on the tabletop and draw a single line with the stylus. It catches the dim light, glowing faintly. The current swirls around, erasing it almost immediately. But the act itself feels sacred, a tiny rebellion against oblivion. A fringe mythological tidbit drifts through your mind. It was said that the god Hermes once invented writing just to record the excuses of mortals. Historians still argue whether that's a metaphor for civilization or an early complaint about paperwork. Either way, you understand the impulse. To explain, to justify, to be remembered. You rest the stylus back where you found it. Around you, the walls seem to sigh, as if grateful for being touched by purpose again. A small ray glides past the doorway, stirring up a gentle snow of sand. The particles catch the light and swirl into shapes, curves, loops, spirals. For an instant, it looks like writing, the sea composing its own message. You whisper, "I hear you." The water hums softly in reply, and for a fleeting moment you feel it. The same pulse that once moved through the hands of Callan, through every builder, every stone. Creation never stops. It only changes medium. You rise toward the temple steps, where moonlight from the surface filters down like thin silver gauze. As you pass the statue of Poseidon, half buried in coral, you notice something new. A crack near the base, small but deliberate. Inside it, glowing faintly, are the marks of human hands pressed into the stone. Perhaps the workers placed them there before the end. Fingerprints of defiance, proof of life. You place your hand beside theirs, aligning your fingers to the ghostly impressions. The fit is perfect. The marble is cold, but the moment feels warm. You whisper, "We remember." And the sea, that eternal editor, seems to pause, just long enough to let the words linger before carrying them away. Time drifts. Months, years, maybe centuries, fold into one another like the slow currents that braid the deep. The sea keeps its promises quietly. No new cities rise here. No ships linger too long above these coordinates. Just water, silence, and the faint shimmer of memory. But stories are buoyant things. They float. Far above, on the sunlit surface, sailors begin to whisper. They speak of strange lights flickering beneath their keels at night, of soft music carried through the hull, of voices reciting names in languages no one speaks anymore. And sometimes, when the waves are calm, they say the sea looks like glass, showing glimpses of towers below, impossible, shimmering, gone with the next ripple. You rise slowly, passing through layers of blue until you break into sunlight again. The air tastes the same, but the world has changed. The city sleeps below. Its echo now lives in stories told by mortals who never saw it. In a small port town along the Aegean coast, you find the first singer. He's old, sunburned, and half drunk, strumming a lyre with a cracked thumb. The crowd around him is small, fishermen, sailors, a few curious children, but they listen like pilgrims. He sings of the city that angered the sea. His version is rough, full of exaggerations. Poseidon jealous of men's marble towers, the architects defying him, a wave taller than Olympus swallowing them whole. He calls it Atlantis, though he pronounces it like a word he just made up to rhyme with madness. You smile faintly. The details are wrong, but the feeling, oh, the feeling is right. That mix of awe, grief, and the stubborn humor mortals carry through every disaster. A mainstream historical fact bubbles up. Oral storytelling was the heartbeat of Greek culture. Poets like Homer wove centuries of memory into song, their words passed from mouth to mouth, morphing with every retelling. History, myth, and dream were never separate things. They all shared a pillow. Here, you watch it happen again. The singer forgets Callan's name, but remembers his courage. The god becomes both villain and teacher, the city both curse and masterpiece. The people listening nod as though they've been there themselves. Maybe, in some way, they have. The old man pauses mid-song to drink. A child tugs his sleeve. Did the sea god forgive them? He squints into the distance, eyes reflecting the setting sun. Forgive, he repeats. No, but he learned to miss them. The crowd murmurs approvingly. It's a good ending, bittersweet, tidy, fit for sleep. You slip away, walking down the pier where the wooden boards creak underfoot. The air smells of tar and nets and wine. Somewhere nearby, a merchant argues with a fisherman about salt prices. Life goes on, stubborn and ordinary. A gust of wind ruffles the water's surface, and for an instant you catch a reflection. Marble beneath the waves, a faint glow, a swirl of light that could be gold dust. Then it's gone. You know now that Poseidon never erased the city entirely. He simply folded it into the sea's rhythm, where its ruins hum softly like a lullaby, and mortals, sensing that hum, invented words to match it. A fringe tidbit whispers through your thoughts. Some philosophers later claimed that myths are memories of places the world forgot to bury completely. Historians still argue whether that's poetic nonsense or a strange kind of truth. But standing here, you suspect it's both. The singer's tune carries on behind you, faint and tender. The words drift over the waves. He built a city bright as dawn and lost it to the tide. Yet every sailor hears its song beneath the moonlit ride. You stop to listen, letting the melody wash through you. The rhythm of it matches the sea's heartbeat, the same slow pulse that moved the hammers, the same cadence that whispered through the cracks of marble. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you're back there again. The smell of plaster, the scrape of chisels, Calon laughing despite himself as the god frowned over blueprints. The memory glows like embers beneath the waves of time. When you open your eyes, the horizon is crimson and gold. The sea looks perfectly innocent again, the way guilty things do when they've had enough time to practice. The singer's voice fades with the wind, leaving only the sound of waves slapping against the pier. Each one is the same, and yet never identical. A reminder that even repetition carries change. Somewhere out there, beneath that glittering expanse, the ruins still breathe. The sea keeps its secrets. The poets keep their lies. Between the two, history drifts, drowsy and content. You turn away from the water, ready to follow the story wherever it resurfaces next. Because that's what stories do. They float. They find listeners. They wait for nightfall. And every time someone closes their eyes to those gentle waves, the city rises again just for a moment, golden and whole. Centuries pass like slow tides. The sea erases, rewrites, erases again. Empires rise, argue, and crumble, and yet the whisper of a drowned city keeps circling the world like driftwood that refuses to sink. Now you find yourself far from Greece, in a candle-lit study somewhere in 19th century Europe. Shelves groan with maps and dusty scrolls. A globe spins lazily beside a half-empty cup of tea. A man with an impressive beard and a terrible posture leans over his desk, muttering. His name is lost to time, but his obsession is obvious. Atlantis. He's been at it for weeks, tracing coastlines, comparing flood myths, measuring ocean depths. On his parchment, the sea is full of penciled arrows and tiny, hopeful notes. Possible ruins here, unverified source. Poseidon equals allegory. He sighs, dips his pen, and writes one more line. Historians still argue whether Atlantis ever existed at all. You smile. They're still arguing, and they always will. A pile of books sits open around him. Plato's Timaeus, The Lost Island of the West, a travel diary from a sailor who swore he saw marble gleam beneath the waves. The man flips through them, brow furrowed, chewing the end of his pen. Outside, rain patters against the window. Somewhere down the street, a church bell tolls. He doesn't notice. He's deep in the argument that's lasted 2,000 years. Was Atlantis a moral fable or a memory, a dream or a disaster? A mainstream historical fact floats into focus. Plato wrote about Atlantis around 360 BCE, describing it as a powerful island nation that sank into the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Scholars have debated ever since whether he meant it literally or metaphorically, a cautionary tale about hubris or a half-remembered echo of a real event. The historian rubs his temples. It's so poetic, he mutters, and poets are the worst witnesses. He sketches a quick outline of the Atlantic Ocean, muttering theories under his breath. Maybe near the Azores, maybe the Canaries, maybe Antarctica. Why not? His eyes flick to a miniature bust of Poseidon on his desk, its trident broken. If you're real, he says quietly, you are a terrible contractor. Lightning flashes outside, and for just a moment, the bust's eyes glint gold. The man jumps, chuckling nervously. Imagination, he says to himself, just imagination. But the sea outside the window groans, faintly, like laughter traveling through 1,000 miles of water. You move closer, peering over his shoulder as he writes the next line of his treatise. Perhaps Atlantis was never a place, but an idea, a reflection of humanity's wish to build perfection, and the sea's reminder that nothing perfect can endure. He pauses, frowning. No, that's too sentimental. He scratches it out, then hesitates. Or maybe just sentimental enough. He leans back in his chair, eyes tired but bright. Every age has its Atlanteans, he murmurs. We all build something the world will one day swallow. You glance at the maps again. In the candlelight, the inked lines shimmer faintly, as though the seas themselves are breathing beneath the paper. For a heartbeat, you almost see it. That old city, glimmering beneath the waves, alive in its quiet way. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some modern divers near the Mediterranean reported finding strange geometric patterns on the sea floor. Perfectly aligned stones buried in sand. Most dismiss them as natural formations. Others whisper their foundations. Historians, ever cautious, still argue. You lean against the desk, invisible to the scholar, and whisper softly, "It was real enough to be remembered." The candle flickers. The flame tilts towards you, then steadies. The man looks up, thoughtful. Maybe it's not about proof, he says aloud. Maybe it's about the part of us that keeps searching, even when the sea tells us to sleep. He writes that down, underlines it twice. Then he smiles, leans back, and closes his notebook with a sigh of satisfaction. Outside, the rain stops. The air hums faintly with that old rhythm, wave against wave, the heartbeat of Poseidon's patience. Somewhere in the depths of the Atlantic, coral glows faintly on forgotten marble. And in this small, quiet room, another mortal adds his verse to the endless argument, never realizing that he's part of the same story, the same city, the same cycle of ambition and surrender. History, after all, is just memory wearing a different accent. Night again. Not underwater this time, not in the echo of marble or salt, but above everything, high and still. The stars hang wide over a quiet sea. The surface glimmers like polished obsidian, and if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint murmur beneath. The city breathing through centuries of silt and silence. You sit at the edge of the shore, warm sand beneath your palms, cool wind brushing across your face. Somewhere nearby, the waves lap gently against the rocks, each one whispering the same wordless story. Build, fall, remember, repeat. The moon hangs low, full and heavy, its reflection stretching towards you in silver ripples. That reflection looks like a road, the kind you could almost walk on if you didn't mind getting a little wet. The air smells faintly of seaweed and old dreams. You think of Callan, of the workers with their squid ink and endless patience, of the gulls that mocked and Poseidon who laughed harder. You think of the quiet pride that mortals carry, the need to leave something behind, even when they know the tide will claim it. Somewhere far below, coral blooms over columns like soft applause. The fish sleep in doorways that once led to markets. The statue of Poseidon leans slightly, his broken trident now serving as a perch for bright blue anemones. The god himself hasn't appeared in centuries, but every so often sailors swear they've seen a man walking along the horizon at dawn, his footprints glowing for a moment before the sea smooths them away. You smile. It sounds like him. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind, one of those details that feels more like poetry than evidence. Ancient Greek mariners used to say that when the sea glowed with tiny golden sparks at night, it was the laughter of Poseidon lighting their path. Modern science calls it bioluminescent plankton, but sometimes truth and myth hold hands under the moon. The water tonight glows that way, soft gold dust dancing on the crests of waves, swirling like lazy fireflies caught in a dream. You reach down and let it run between your fingers. It feels warm, alive, as if the sea remembers you too. A faint sound carries across the breeze, someone singing far down the beach. A low, meandering tune, without words, without hurry. Maybe a fisherman, maybe just the wind. It's hard to tell. The melody drifts over the water and blends with the sigh of the tide. You close your eyes. The rhythm is hypnotic. You can almost hear hammer strikes hidden within it, the echo of chisels shaping marble, of human hearts trying to make sense of eternity. A fringed tidbit flickers across your thoughts. Some philosophers once said that sleep is the sea's gift to mortals, a brief drowning and rebirth each night. Historians still argue what that meant, but tonight it makes perfect sense. The stars shimmer, and your thoughts begin to soften, like ink bleeding through old parchment. The edges of the world blur, the waves hush lower, the sand shifts under you, gentle and forgiving. The scent of salt and stone fades into something sweet, like honey bread, baked by accident and perfection all at once. Somewhere between waking and dream, you see the city again. Not ruined, not new, but timeless. The towers gleam, the courtyards hum with laughter. Poseidon stands at the edge, watching, no longer angry, no longer proud, just there. He catches your eye and nods once, as if to say, "We did all right, didn't we?" You nod back, smiling. The city brightens, gold and blue, until everything dissolves into light. And then, slowly, even that fades. The sea is quiet now. The waves roll soft and even, one after another, steady as a heartbeat you could fall asleep to. The night air hums gently with the warmth of faraway stars, and every breath feels lighter, slower, deeper. If you listen carefully, you can still hear the sound of chisels, faint and rhythmic, as though the world itself is still being carved somewhere beyond sight. The builders are long gone, but their story lingers, tucked between the folds of time. You breathe in. The scent of salt and memory fills your lungs. You exhale, and the tension of the day drifts away with the tide. The sea keeps its secrets, but it also keeps its promises. It remembers what it takes, reshaping everything it touches, not to erase, but to renew, just like sleep. As the waves hush against the shore, your thoughts begin to slow. The details blur into the sound of the surf, marble, moonlight, laughter, water. The city is still there, somewhere deep below, resting in the cradle of the ocean's calm. The gods are quiet now, their tempers spent, their hands folded. All that remains is the pulse of the tide, soft and endless. Let it carry you. The water glows faintly gold, then dims, then stills. The sea hums once more, a low, kind note. The story ends the way all good ones should, gently and without hurry. Sleep now. You've traveled far enough.